In the heart of America's bustling justice system, where the scales of fairness often tip under the weight of prejudice, one shocking encounter is about to unfold that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, race, and redemption. Picture a smug, racist cop strutting into court, ready to harass a poised black woman he assumes is just another defendant, only to discover she's the newly appointed chief of police, his ultimate boss. If you're in the USA or UK and crave edge of your seat, tales of justice served with a twist, smash that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that exposes the raw truths of society. Your support keeps these narratives alive. Officer Jack Harlan had always prided himself on being the kind of cop who kept the streets clean, a phrase he muttered under his breath like a mantra while patrolling the gritty neighborhoods of downtown Atlanta. At 52, with a salt and pepper mustache that he thought made him look authoritative but really just accentuated his perpetual scowl, Jack had spent 3 decades on the force, rising to sergeant through a combination of grit, connections, and an unyielding belief in his own superiority. He was the guy who pulled over black drivers for suspicious taillights that weren't broken, who cracked jokes in the locker room about those people causing all the crime, and who never hesitated to throw his weight around in court to ensure his arrest stuck. Today was no different, or so he thought. The courthouse loomed like a gray monolith under the Georgia sun, its marble steps worn from years of footsteps seeking justice, or at least pretending to. Jack adjusted his uniform, the badge gleaming like a trophy, as he strode into courtroom 5B for what he assumed would be a routine testimony in a minor drug possession case. The defendant, some woman named Alara Thompson, a name that didn't ring any bells but conjured images in his mind of the usual suspects, poor, defiant, and in his biased view, guilty before proven innocent. He scanned the room, eyes landing on a sharply dressed black woman sitting at the defense table, her posture impeccable, her dark curls pulled back into a professional bun, exuding an air of quiet confidence that irked him immediately. Figures, he grumbled to himself, assuming she was the one. The judge hadn't arrived yet, and the prosecutor was shuffling papers, so Jack sauntered over, his boots echoing on the tiled floor, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, look who's trying to play dress up in court today, he sneered, leaning against the table, invading her space. You think putting on a suit makes you less guilty? I've seen your type 100 times, always got an excuse, always blaming the system. Alara looked up slowly, her brown eyes meeting his with a steadiness that should have warned him, but Jack was too deep in his arrogance to notice. She was in her mid-40s, with skin like polished mahogany and a presence that commanded respect, but to him, she was just another target for his thinly veiled racism. Excuse me, she said calmly, her voice smooth and measured, laced with an education he envied but would never admit. You heard me, Jack pressed on, his voice rising just enough to draw a few glances from the bailiff and court clerk. Sitting there all prim and proper, but I bet you've got a rap sheet longer than my arm. What is it this time? Drugs, theft, or just being in the wrong place because that's what you folks do? He chuckled at his own joke, expecting her to cower or snap back, giving him more ammunition. Instead, Alara smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes but held a glint of something sharper, knowledge, perhaps, or anticipation. The courtroom doors swung open then, and in walked Judge Harlan, no relation to Jack, thank God, but a stern old white man with a reputation for fairness that Jack often dismissed as soft on crime. The judge banged his gavel, calling the session to order, and Jack straightened up, ready to take the stand. But as the proceedings began, something felt off. The prosecutor announced the case, but when it came time to identify the defendant, it wasn't Alara at all. It was a young white man in the back row, looking sheepish and out of place. Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. Who was this woman, then? Why was she at the defense table? The judge cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I'd like to welcome our newest addition to the Atlanta Police Department leadership. Chief Alara Thompson, it's an honor to have you observing today. The words hit Jack like a freight train. Chief, his boss. The room seemed to spin as realization dawned. Alara Thompson wasn't a defendant. She was the newly appointed chief of police, transferred from Chicago where she'd reformed a corrupt precinct and earned national acclaim for her work on community policing. Jack's face drained of color, his mustache twitching as he stammered an apology that sounded more like a choke. I didn't know, Ma'am. I thought. Alara stood, her height matching his, her gaze piercing. You thought what, Sergeant Harlan? That every black woman in a courthouse must be a criminal. That's the problem with assumptions, they reveal more about you than anyone else. The courtroom murmured, and Jack felt the weight of eyes on him, judging him for once. But this was just the beginning of the twists that would unravel his world. As the day wore on, Alara didn't just let it slide, she launched a quiet investigation into Jack's record, uncovering a pattern of racial profiling that had been swept under the rug for years. Complaints from black citizens, dismissed as exaggerations, piled up like evidence in a trial against him. Jack, panicking, tried to rally his old boys network in the department, whispering about how affirmative action was ruining the force, but times had changed. Alara was no pushover, she'd risen through ranks facing worse than him, from sexist superiors to outright threats. In a shocking turn, it emerged that Jack's own daughter, whom he'd raised with his narrow views, had secretly been dating a black man and was now advocating for police reform online, exposing family secrets that painted Jack as a hypocrite. The media caught wind, headlines blared, racist cops courtroom blunder, Harasses new boss, and protests erupted outside the precinct. Jack was suspended, forced into sensitivity training that felt like torture to his ego. But the deepest twist came when Alara, in a moment of unexpected mercy, offered him a chance at redemption, mentor at-risk youth in the very neighborhoods he'd patrolled with disdain. At first, Jack resisted, bitterness festering like an old wound. Yet, as he spent time with kids who looked nothing like him but shared stories of dreams crushed by systemic bias, cracks formed in his armored prejudice. One boy, Marcus, reminded him of his younger self, angry, lost, but talented. Marcus's art depicted police as monsters, and Jack saw his reflection in those drawings. Slowly, painfully, Jack began to change, apologizing publicly in a press conference that went viral, tears streaming as he admitted, I was wrong. For too long, I let fear and ignorance guide me. Alara watched from the sidelines, her own past flashing back, growing up in the projects, witnessing her brother's wrongful arrest, vowing to fix the system from within. She hadn't become chief to punish but to heal. In a final twist, Jack uncovered corruption higher up, his former captain involved in evidence tampering to frame minorities, and with Alara's backing, he blew the whistle, becoming an unlikely ally in reform. The department transformed, implementing body cams, diversity training, and community outreach. Jack retired not as a villain but as a changed man, his daughter by his side, proud for the first time. Alara, meanwhile, rose even higher, nominated for national awards, her story inspiring a generation. But whispers lingered. Was Jack's redemption genuine, or just survival? In the end, the courtroom incident wasn't just a blunder, it was the spark that ignited change, proving that even the deepest prejudices could be uprooted when confronted with truth. Years later, Jack volunteered at a youth center, telling his story to wide-eyed kids. I harassed a woman because of her skin, he'd say, unaware she was my boss, and my salvation. The twists of fate had rewritten his life, turning a racist cop into a reluctant hero, reminding everyone that justice, like life, is full of surprises.